Today on Hot Takes, we're talking about The Breakfast Club and finding your voice. Be sure to check it out. You don't want to miss it. Coming up next. Hey guys, welcome back to Hot Takes. I'm super excited to bring you another great episode today. Be sure you like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, as well as join in on our Patreon for as low as $1 a month and get a shout out at the end of each episode. Be sure to do that. That really helps us out over on the channel. And if you or anybody you know is looking for any film or video services, be sure to check out evanrogersfilm.com. Evan Rogers Film, creating the visuals of the future. Guys, I wanted to dive in today on The Breakfast Club, which is a classic film. It's actually in my top 5, top 3, top 2, maybe even my favorite. It's so hard for me to figure out exactly where it lies, but The Breakfast Club, directed by and written by the great John Hughes, who a lot of you know. I wanted to kind of dive in on just why I feel like that film specifically is brilliant, and also, like I was saying, finding your voice, how this director and writer John Hughes puts himself out there in his work. This kind of links with being a little bit, this is cliche, over the head, beat over the head, but him being a self-starter and more specifically developing a value proposition and how you can do that. So I want to talk about John Hughes. John Hughes is obviously one of the great 80s writers. Obviously, he transcended a couple other generations as well, but most specifically in the 80s with Ferris Bueller, Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, and did I say Ferris Bueller? Yeah, Ferris Bueller twice, whatever. One of the best movies ever. Also in my top 5. John Hughes is brilliant for his comedy, and I wrote here comedy with purpose. He was very intentional about the way he would make jokes, and a lot of nowadays, obviously, not everything is as politically correct. But it's amazing to me why I'm so passionate about John Hughes as a filmmaker is his goal being to make people feel like they're welcome and have a seat at the table. Right. Breakfast Club is a great example of that. If you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, I'll just kind of give you a little like hodgepodge of what happens. Basically, it's these kids that come to detention at a school on the weekend, and you've got, the punk, the rebel, the pretty girl, the nerd, and the jock, right? The 5 of them are all there. Brilliant cast of characters. It's one of the better, it's very specific to each role. Let's just put it that way. I love the attitude. Each character has great attitude, and that's something that's specific to John Hughes that I think he does really well. He embodies that 80s coming of age attitude that I think is quite funny now when you watch it back, because as a teenager it's hilarious. That's what you want. You want to fit in, do what you want to do, whatever. But attitude is one of the things he did really well, and that helped create real characters, and that's kind of what the whole plot of the film is. It's this, like I said, coming of age. These kids get to talk about how their family lives are and stuff toward the end. At the beginning, obviously, they're all mad at each other or whatever, just mad to be in detention. But later, they become, a close gang of buddies. They all shared a great moment that day at detention, and then they don't even do anything in detention. It's pretty hilarious. The teacher that's watching them is hilarious. You should just watch it. If you haven't seen the movie, it's great. It's definitely a John Hughes classic. But what I think Hughes does so well in that film specifically, like I said, comedy with a purpose and attitude, he really just puts a singular day in a world of its own and makes it feel like it's this much bigger experience with the music he chooses, with all this stuff, right? And I think people know a filmmaker like John Hughes by his style. If you've seen Ferris Bueller, kind of the same thing. If you've seen 16 Candles, Weird Science, all of those movies have the John Hughes flair of that comedy with purpose and the character attitude and, just the very vivid colors of each of these different characters and what they offer. Colors meaning, obviously, what their flair is, what their spark is. And, I think what I learned from Hughes that is so brilliant is that he was able to see himself through each of these characters. From interviews I've watched, from things I've read, the more I've studied John Hughes, the more I realize that he really saw himself in each character or saw a life experience in each character. And that is so key when it comes to developing your value proposition, which we're going to get into in just a minute. from the fact that he wouldn't even shoot when it was popular, would not even shoot in LA. He didn't even want to shoot in LA. He said, we're going to shoot in my hometown in Chicago, and everything in the suburbs there is actually Chicago, that we're not shooting anything in LA. And it's so crazy to think. I don't know if you guys have seen Ferris Bueller, but the main, probably the biggest scene, the twist and shout scene when they're out in the street and they're all, Matthew Broderick's up on the float and they're all just having a great time lip syncing to that song. That's all Chicago. The whole thing is Chicago. None of it breathes LA like most 80s films or anything like that. But that was John Hughes, man. He just said, I'm going to go right into what I know best, and I'm going to deliver, who I am through these characters and show you where I grew up and lived, right? And I love him. I love him for that. He was the king of comedy with purpose, attitude, and characters, and, just a brilliant, great story. I mean, even his non-coming of age films like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and others like that. Even Home Alone, which he wrote. Home Alone's obviously more of a young comedy or whatever. They're all family movies. They all focus on the family, and he that was him. People know John Hughes. They know his style, and so I wanted to get into that because for me personally, what I've learned from him is, like I was mentioning, how do I develop my own style? What is my value proposition for people? And I think this is really important no matter what your career path. Like I was saying in the previous episode from last week, we focus specifically on, being not only being a self-starter, but work ethic and focusing on yourself and growing yourself first as a person, because your craft and opportunities and people in your network are all external factors, right? They're all great parts of who you are, but ultimately growing yourself, disciplining yourself, and learning who you are is really important, right? That's probably the most important thing that you can do for yourself and your career. And so when we're thinking about, developing, me personally, when I'm thinking about developing my value proposition, I'm thinking about, what do I offer people? And probably a lot of you know this, especially if you went to business school. This is a big one, especially if you're an entrepreneur. This is a big one. For me, I have to ask myself, what do I offer people? With this show and with 1 in 20 show, what I hope to offer people is the tools and trade that and tips that you guys can use to be able to develop your career and take the first step to being a self-starter. That's really what I try to offer with the show. And me personally, Evan, I try to do that day to day with my people and my network and my friends. And, I hope that I can give a platform to help people grow and show people, and vice versa, also me grow from them, watching how they do it. And just showing what the power of being a self-starter can do for you, right? That's probably really the heart of what I try to give people as far as my perspective and what I've learned from that. But that's the thing, is you have to really identify, what are you offering people? I remember for me, I had to look at that more seriously, actually, even just in the year-long break that I took from the show because of COVID and other reasons. I was at a startup at the time. I was really, really, really busy. And I just didn't really know. I was kind of floating around, I was working as an editor and I was offering, my editing services on the side as well. And I just didn't really know, like, okay, well, what's the purpose of this? Where do I land? I also like to produce. I like to color. I like to direct. I like to shoot. I like to do basically anything in the arts. I've even done theater. I've done a million different things. But what do I offer? What is my one thing, right? And we've talked about this on some of the next up episodes, and you'll probably see those coming up recently. We shot a good handful of them, and they should be coming out soon. But that's the thing, is it's good to keep your horizons broad, but you also have to know what you're offering people, right? And the mediums are the next step of that. And that's why I've been talking so specifically about finding your true north and who you are, right? Something that John Hughes did really well. I know previous episode was about Kobe. Something Kobe did very well. People knew him as the clutch guy, at the end of games, a winner, right? And the work ethic of gold. And with John Hughes, he's done another deceased person. My gosh, it's sad. I'm talking about legends now, and people that are no longer with us, but people that have greatly impacted me, And so when I'm thinking about what I offer, my value proposition, I'm hoping that I can bring people into the fold of, what I do in my work, and that it all links back to, like I said, my journey of, being a self-starter and trying to help other people realize how they can do it themselves, figure out their craft and their path and do it for themselves. So that's, the main point. I think that's important. You got to ask yourself, what do you offer? And, what are you going to bring to the table when when you're pursuing, like I said, your mediums are that next, second tier. First tier being most important, figuring out yourself and what you offer people. Second, I would say repetition is the key to helping you do that and finding your voice. For me, I think the more that I'm out there in the field, whatever it is, even if it means in the edit bay, the more that I'm doing it, the more I'm contemplating my direction and where I'm going. And previous episode, obviously, we talked a lot about disciplining yourself and figuring out, how you can stay consistent and not dropping the ball. And so when it comes to, finding your voice, repetition is key. The more that you're in the editing bay, the more that you're out in the field, the more you're auditing people. If you're, an accountant, the more you're in the numbers, the more you're surrounded by something, the better it gets. You train the muscle memory, the mental muscle memory, to get better and better. Or maybe it's physical too. If you're an athlete, it's physical. If you're a DP or a camera op, that's obviously a physical thing. If you're an actor, it's a physical thing, of course. But train those muscles, man. Train the muscles to remember who and, what your style is, what your little flair is, what's the thing that you bring. And, obviously there's nothing new under the sun. You're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're just trying to do what you do best, how you express yourself best, and just continue to do that consistently. I even said that in the last episode too. Lots of cliche stuff here, but yeah. So continuing to sell that, right? You're trying to sell what you do best. Keep learning it. That's what the goal is repetition helps you find your voice. The more you're around it, not just envisioning it, right? Like I think we've talked about that a lot on the Next Step series that is going to be coming out. You can't just be a dreamer and, envision something coming to life. And I think for me, that would drive me crazy because I almost have the opposite problem where I want to create too much, right? It's a balance. It's trying to figure out the balance. But most importantly, like, what I'm hinting at is when you have your ideas, you do want to make them happen. And if they feel so far reaching and something that you can't do right away, then maybe scale it down and figure out a different way to do it, right? There's so many different ways to approach something. And that helps you train that repetition muscle and figure out what your style is. For me personally, I'm always thinking about what is my visual style when I'm producing? What is my visual style when it's my own product? When I'm shooting, what is my special style? And my friends will tease me to death about this. I started shooting a lot of things Dutch, which means that if you don't know film, you basically take your horizon and tilt it left or right just a smidge to create a more artsy look. And normally that's done in film very, very sparingly because it's supposed to show when something's not right. But I've kind of turned that into my style, and my friends tease me, call it the Evan Rogers twist is what I call it. But, it's such a stupid name, but I do that sometimes now, a lot more sparingly because I used to do it too much. But like that's a little flair that sometimes I offer. Sometimes it has to do with the filters I use on my lenses or, whatever it is, even when I'm producing. But really it's the content too, right? You always got to focus on that content. It's not always about your visual profile, but whatever it is, think about what you're offering, right? And the more you do it, the more you try it out, the better you get at it. So that's repetition and finding your voice. And then thirdly, kind of to wrap all of this up, I really love to think about how can you sell it to them time and time again. And by them, I mean clients, to your network, to the people that are onlookers to what you do, right? And I'm going to take a step back from the creative world here. I think this is really important for any job, whether you're in food service, whether you're in business, whether you're an athlete, whatever it is, you are always on display. Perception is everything. People are always watching. So whatever you do, you should try to be doing it the best you can, right? I think I learned this the hard way in a lot of scenarios where maybe I was, with my buddies or something and joking around somebody, even just on set, around, a mentor or somebody that I would hope to work with in the future. And me in the moment, not even thinking about like, oh, well, maybe that person is watching me, right? It's a funny reality. We don't always think about it because we're in the moment having fun or, having a good time, but that might professionally be hurting, your perception to somebody else. It's not even about you. It's not even your intention that matters. That's what's crazy. That's the craziest part, right? So when you're thinking of selling yourself to other people, it's almost like selling yourself as a product, making yourself more marketable, making yourself more available to do things, making yourself be the top of mind for people. Wherever and however you try to do that, you've got to be out there putting your name at the top of the list. Social media is a great example. If you have content, I have friends, in my network that post way more than I do, and they're getting booked, and it's not a coincidence that they're obviously very, very talented, but they also share their work and people keep seeing them, and it keeps coming to the top of the list, right? For people when they're looking, potentially they've got an idea or something, or they know somebody looking to hire, right? Hire evanrogersfilm.com. Check it out. We're creating the visuals of the future. Okay, shameless plug. We're gonna get off of that, but that's what I'm trying to say is, I think my friends do a very good job in my network of, promoting themselves really well. And that's something I'm, a huge reason why I've done this show is to do just that, to try to, stay top of mind and be consistent and, selling who I am as Evan. And this, I've done a lot of, talking in circles here, but that's really what it's about with your value proposition. Figure out who you are and sell directly to that. Now, on top of that, you also want to figure out who your audience is. That's another thing that we could talk on a different, a different episode. But figuring out who your audience is and why they like you and why they watch you and how you can give it to them, right? Or they watch what you shoot or whatever it is, right? But like I said, it's not just a film thing. I'm just talking film. This has to do with everything. It has to do with your future job potential when you're working, a 9-to-5 as, an accountant, or when you're working in food service. All of this matters toward you promoting up too. You're always got to be thinking about your professional image. And, something that's important too is remove yourself. You want to be authentic and real with people, but, if you feel uncomfortable about it being you, come up with some version of yourself that you're able to sell. You don't have to always be, giving away everything about your personal life when you're out on the job, right? You can figure out ways in which you sell yourself better when you're, kind of playing a role. When you're playing, for example, Evan, the cinematographer. When I'm playing that role, I'm trying to do something more specific with my visual style so that people pick up on that visual style. And that's different than Evan, the colorist, who's, sitting in a color room and trying to figure out that palette. But it's still very consistent, if that makes sense. You're still honing in on your value proposition, no matter the medium. John Hughes did all of this stuff very well. You can watch all of his films and see it. This is something that he did very well in The Breakfast Club. And, we talk about individuality. Each of those different characters all had a very specific defined profile, and think about why we like them, and think about why we like The Office. Think about why we like Friends. Think about why we like all the sitcoms we love. It's because we're watching characters play out their roles that are consistent night for night. And they have their own almost value propositions, something very important for you to think about. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope that all makes sense and, is helpful to you. I want to make sure that I hit on these points again. Be sure you like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. And join in on our Patreon for as low as $1 a month and get a shout out at the end of each episode. And if you or anybody you know is looking for any film or video services, check out evanrogersfilm.com. Evan Rogers Film, creating the visuals of the future. That was today's hot take. I'm excited for the future, and I will see you on the next one.